This is Find Your Dream Job, the podcast that helps you get hired, have the career you want, and make a difference in life. I'm Mac Pritchard, your host and publisher of Mac's List. I'm joined by my co-hosts, Ben Forrestag, our managing director, and Jenna Forstrom, our community manager. This week, we're talking about how you can manage online reference checks. Our show is brought to you by Hack the Hidden Job Market, the new online course now available from Mac's List. As many as 8 out of 10 job openings never get advertised. Is your dream job one of them? Learn how to uncover hidden jobs and get noticed by the hiring managers who fill them. Visit maxlist.org/course. Employers used to do all reference checks by telephone. These days, however, many hiring managers use online surveys to learn what your references think. Our guest expert this week is Ray Bixler. He runs an online reference checking company called Skillshare. Later in the show, Ray will explain how employers use these surveys, and he and I will talk about what job seekers can do to get a good online reference. Do you think reference checks don't matter much anymore? Ben Forstag says you need to think again. Ben has found a blog post that lays out 5 common myths about employment references. He'll share it with us in a moment. You've just gotten a job offer. Congratulations. Now it's time to negotiate salary and benefits. But have you worried that the company might take back your job offer if you ask for too much money? That's the question of the week. It comes from listener Paul Frazier. Jenna Forstrom tells us her answer in a few minutes. But first, as always, let's check in with the Mac's List team. Jenna, Ben, I'm curious, how do you two manage your references, and how do you stay in touch with references when you're out there doing a job search?
Well, I'll admit, if I had to use one word, it'd probably be unevenly. So some of my former professional references I stay in contact with because I still do volunteer work with the organization, or we're personal acquaintances. One of my old bosses at the YMCA, we routinely share baseball news back and forth. So we're often in touch, and whenever I've needed to let him know that, you might get a call from an employer, it's been pretty easy. In other cases, though, I've got some employers. I worked in Spain for a while, for example, and I know when you were checking references for me, Mac, it was really hard to get a hold of this guy because he's no longer at the organization I worked at, and I think he's living in Czechoslovakia. Evidently, this is back in the 80s because he's living in Czechoslovakia. No, he's working in the Czech Republic now. And so I've not done a great job of keeping track of where he is and keeping an open line of communication with him. And it's one of these things I probably should do a better job with.
I do think I had a conversation with that supervisor in Prague via Skype.
Yeah, it took a while to track him down,
right.
Though. I think it was like 2 weeks or something. And in the meantime, I'm twiddling my thumbs wondering, are you going to offer me a job? And,
right. Yeah. Who is this obsessive compulsive who's checking all your past supervisors?
No, I think, it's a great idea. And it's certainly something that I've done as a hiring manager in the past. But I didn't make my life any easier by not maintaining like a real clear line of communication with that guy.
Yeah. Well, Jenna, how about you? Are you in touch with your former supervisors and perhaps coworkers?
Some of them I am still in contact with, and I think it's really important to manage like professional relationships, like your supervisors and your managing directors, your coworkers and colleagues, and then also having personal professional relationships that you can share like character references with. So I think a lot of those people come from my nonprofit and community volunteering aspects or even best friends. But then also like I've got hiring managers and other people that I can reference to. And those are kind of, you keep it track on LinkedIn and you give them a heads up when you're about to apply for a job, but it's not something that I'm in daily conversation with naturally. Also, fun fact, Ben, it is no longer called the Czech Republic. It's Chechnya or whatever now.
It's not Chechnya.
What is, it's like Czechia or something. I don't know.
It's the Czech Republic.
No, it changed.
What?
Literally like in May.
Okay, we're going to have to roll back.
We'll add this to the show notes because I totally have a reference for this.
Okay. Well, that is indeed a fun fact. And one thing I've been very conscientious about, Jenna, is reaching out to at least one person at every former employer and asking for a LinkedIn recommendation, those short 2 or 3 sentence statements that appear on your profile page. And that the value of that is not only is it there in your LinkedIn profile, but it provides an opportunity to go back to that supervisor and just remind them what you accomplished and make it, again, about your accomplishments, not just the fact that you worked together. And I found that to be helpful. I will say, Ben, while I've done a good job of staying in touch with former supervisors and colleagues, when I was at graduate school, I regret not finding ways to stay in touch with former instructors there. And I didn't do that as an undergraduate as well. And I think there's a lot of value in academic references as well.
Yeah, I mean, one thing I have done a pretty decent job at is keeping communication with some of my old grad school professors, even though the correspondence with one of them basically entails me continually telling him I'm not interested in getting a PhD.
I have the same thing with one of my college professors. Like my closest college professor, we're Facebook friends, and every time she messages me, she's like, there's a new PhD program that just opened up. And I'm like, I have no desire to be a teacher. Sorry. But it's fun.
But it's good to have that correspondence and stay in touch with them.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, and I can know, and having worked with you both and knowing you now, I can see you both why your former professors would think about you as good teachers. Well, great. Well, thank you both. And let's turn to you, Ben, because every week you're out there searching the nooks and crannies of the internet, looking for websites, books, and tools our listeners can use in their job search and career. What have you uncovered for us this week, Ben?
This week, I want to share a blog post called The 5 Job Reference Myths That Can Destroy Your Chances and Reputation. And this comes from the website mainstreet.com. Real good content here, and definitely worth a read. And I'm just going to read through the 5 myths, and I'm going to leave it up to our listeners to go to the website and see why these are indeed myths. So myth number 1, companies are not allowed to say anything negative about a former employee during a documented reference check. Clearly a myth. Myth number 2, former employers direct all reference checks to their human resources department, and those people won't say anything negative. Myth number 3, I should have my employment references listed on my resume and hand them in together. This is one that I think is particularly good because I see so many people put their references in their resume, or they put the throwaway line of like references available upon request. And I always think like, no duh. Yeah, those are available.
And that's space you could use on your resume for other purposes.
Yeah, talk about yourself. Don't talk about people who could talk about you. Myth number 4, once a company hires me, my job references don't matter anymore. Mac, it looks like you want to say something about this one.
Well, I think most jobs, you're likely to be there for 3 to 5 years. Maybe you'll move around inside the organization, but eventually you will be looking again. So stay in touch with your references.
Absolutely. And myth number 5, I sued my former company, and according to job reference laws, they are not allowed to say anything. This is not one I have any personal experience with, but indeed it is a myth. And to learn more about all 5 of these myths, check out 5 Job Reference Myths That Can Destroy Your Chances and Your Reputation. It's available at mainstreet.com, and we will have the URL in the show notes.
Great. Well, thanks, Ben. And I'm glad you shared these myths, particularly number 1, because I think which was that companies aren't allowed to say anything negative about a former employee during a reference check, because I think people think they don't have to worry about reference checks because employers won't say anything. And in fact, that's usually not the case.
Yeah, I think sometimes people think this is like a pro forma, symbolic action that like once they reach out to your references, like you've already gotten the job essentially. But I've seen jobs be derailed by bad references. And one way to think about it is, when an employer calls one of your references and asks for their opinion, that person is putting their own professional reputation on the line for you. Right. And so if you are not a quality candidate, it's unlikely that they are going to put their reputation on the line and risk their own standing in the community by lying about you. So I think these are important, and employers do spend a lot of time thinking about them and talking to references.
Well, thank you, Ben. And if you have a suggestion for Ben, please write him and we may share your idea on the show. His address is ben@maxlist.org. Now let's turn to you, our listeners, and Jenna Forstrom, our community manager is here with us to answer one of your questions. Jenna, what's in the Max List mailbag this week?
Today's question comes from Paul Frazier, who asks,
Hi, my name's Paul Frazier. My question is around negotiating when in an offer status with a job, as far as best practices or tips for both salary, benefits, time off. My fear is always that a too strong of a counter or a proposal would spook the employer and they'd rescind the offer. Is that a valid fear, or is there always kind of a way to have a conversation without fear of them pulling the offer? Thanks. Bye.
typically I would say I've never heard of a job offer being taken back once the offer has been handed over. The exception to that is I know a few people have lost jobs when it's come out that they've lied about some credential or some sort of formatting issue. So if you're honest, I wouldn't worry about it. The flip side of that is I totally had a job offer taken back one time, but it was for a small business, and they offered me a job, and I pulled I've talked about this on previous podcasts, my parents live in China, can I have 48 hours to talk it over with them? I really value their opinion. And they said, sure, no problem, 48 hours. And then within that 48 hours, they were like, oh, you must not be interested in the role. We're going to take it back. And so I was like, well, that's crazy. But so putting all that aside, I think as long as you have done your research and you talk about, we talk about using Glassdoor, and you know what the salary is, about average salary or going rate for your role in your location, and you can speak to why you deserve X amount increase in the offer for salary, or if you have something in your maybe back pocket like benefits or working remotely a few days a week, or if they do some sort of education reimbursement. Those are all things to talk about in that negotiation. But I think as long as you are open and honest and upfront and have facts to why you deserve that, that's the key in negotiating. But I wouldn't worry too much about it. Unless you're doubling the salary, something crazy, no one's going to take back an offer, because that's part of the HR game and employers expect it. Mac and Ben, do you guys have any suggestions?
I think you hit the nail on the head, Jenna. I'd just say as long as you're being professional and polite in how you are negotiating, and as long as you don't draw an unreasonable line in the sand and say, I will not budge from this position, the worst case that's going to happen, I'm guessing, is that they would just say, no, we can't do that. But I don't see most reasonable employers just pulling their offer without coming back and saying, we can't do that, or that's not possible. I think by the time they get to the point of making an offer to you, they want you to be there. And so they're going to go to whatever means they can to get you to accept that offer.
Yeah, I think that's spot on advice, Jenna. Do your homework, have your facts at hand. And when you have there's an offer on the table, that's when you're most desirable to that employer. And they are most likely to say yes to things that become much more difficult to get after you are inside the organization. You've been there for 6 or 12 months. So don't, be reasonable, but base it on research, as you said, Jenna. And I think if you do that, you'll be pleasantly surprised by the results.
Thanks, guys. And thanks, Paul, for calling in.
Yes, thank you, Paul and Jenna. And if you have a question for Jenna, please email her. Her address is jenna@maxlist.org. Or call our listener line. That number is area code 716-562-8225. If we use your question on the air, we'll send you a free copy of our new book, publishing in February, Land Your Dream Job Anywhere. These segments with Ben and Jenna are sponsored by Hack the Hidden Job Market, the new online course now available from MaxList. As many as 80% of all jobs never get posted. Instead, employers fill these openings by word of mouth. Our new course shows you how this hidden job market works. We teach you how to find plum gigs that never appear on a job board, how to stand out online in a crowd of applicants, and how to connect with insiders who can help your career. In each of the course's 12 modules, you get the tools and tips you need to get the work you want. Meaningful work, work that makes a difference, work that you can love. Hack the Hidden Job Market is now live. Register at www.maxlist.org/course. Now let's turn to this week's guest expert, Ray Bixler. Ray Bixler is CEO of Skill Survey, an online reference checking technology firm that helps organizations recruit, hire, and retain talent. Ray has more than 20 years of human resource and career development experience. He joins us today from Philadelphia. Ray, thanks for being on the show.
Thank you, Mac. I appreciate the opportunity.
Well, it's a pleasure to have you on the program. Now, our topic today is online reference checking. Ray, for many of our listeners, I think this is still a new idea. People are accustomed to reference checks being done by telephone or maybe even holding on to those old letters of reference. Tell us, why are employers turning to online reference checking?
So you're right that if we were to ask or poll your audience, Mac, do they have any idea of what reference checking is? I'm certain you almost get 100% participation and affirmation that everyone knows what reference checking is. But when you add the one word online, that's where most people go silent. So online, of course, is something that has transformed how reference checking is done. People do get frustrated using the phone, even though everybody has one, right? They not only on their desk, but now they're walking around with a phone in their pocket or purse. And so people you would think would be more readily available now than ever before using the traditional methods of the phone. And yet that's not the case. People are harder to get a hold of. References are less likely to return phone calls of recruiters. They're still done usually between the hours of 8 to 5. And so ultimately, it's just not working anymore. And so online reference checking has changed all of that because of the availability where it's online, it's on the internet, it's mobile, accessible. And so people can use their device of choice to complete the step, and they can also do it whenever they choose to.
So are you finding, Ray, that you're getting a better response from employers when you use online surveys than through old-fashioned phone calls?
Well, that's one of the many benefits. And so when we launched Skill Survey many years ago, the market was telling us, the market being recruiters or hiring managers who would traditionally do reference checking, they would tell us that they wouldn't even be able to get 50% of references to respond leveraging the phone. Using our technology, they're finding that 85% and in some cases, 90% of references are completing their particular step in the process.
And our listeners are job seekers and people interested in managing their career. How does that higher rate of participation benefit job seekers, Ray?
Well, actually, you talk about the data being really important and in ways that were never used in the hiring process. Our clients, and so when career seekers are looking to apply for work, and if in fact they are asked to complete the reference checking step via an online solution like ours, the number one data metric that matters most for our users is the percentage of references that completed. We know scientifically through 18 validity studies today, I don't know if your audience is aware of what that really means, but ultimately, does it predict outcomes? Do references, by going through this particular process, predict how someone might perform in a role post making the hiring decision? And the answer is yes, predicated on the number one data point being the percentage of references that completed on behalf of the applicant.
So you're seeing more references completed on behalf of applicants with the online tool. And I know you're not only collecting responses to surveys, but you also pay attention to other factors like response time. Tell us why response time matters to employers and how that affects an applicant's or a job seeker's application.
Well, so response time matters for an employer or prospective employer because they want to see if the applicant is prepared as well as still motivated to move through the hiring process. Do they have a sense of urgency? Do they actually do tasks that they're requested to do? And so when you think about reference checking done via the phone, it really didn't require the applicant to do much more than just hand over, usually on a piece of paper, sometimes in an email, a couple of names for the recruiter to call. Now that it's done online, the applicant actually is involved. They are the ones who are entering the references online. And so the longer it takes them to actually enter in the references, it suggests they're not prepared as much as other applicants are. And so that response time is very critical for our clients to understand whether or not the applicant is prepared, is task-oriented, gets things done, follows instructions well, and is still motivated for the role.
Okay. So as applicants go through the hiring process, they need to pay attention to deadlines. And certainly if employers notice when one applicant sends in a thank you note the next day and the other note might drift in a week later or maybe doesn't happen at all. And what I'm hearing you say about online reference checks is you got to bring the same kind of hustle to this process as well, and it will reflect well on you when you do that.
That's correct. They've got to be prepared. And one thing they've got to recognize now by listening to this conversation, Mac, is that it's more than just the standard one or two references. Using online reference checking allows employers to ask for many more references to be involved. So career seekers, people who are looking for work, must be ready and prepared to not just have the traditional one or two references ready. They've got to have 5 or 6 ready to participate in this process.
So, Ray, I think for many job seekers, online reference checks are still a new thing. So walk us through the process. How does it work? You've applied for a job, and the employer says, I'm ready to check references, and I'm using an online process. What happens next?
So quite simply, an email would be sent via the system to the job seeker. They would look at their email inbox, click on the email that says, hey, we're moving forward with the reference checking component of our hiring process. When they click on that email, they'll read the instructions, letting them know that they are responsible. They, being the applicant, are responsible for entering in their references. And by entering in references, they need to enter in the references, first and last name, their email address, even a phone number in case a phone call is necessary after the report is complete. So they will have to enter all that information, which is why they have to be prepared and ready, because people are paying attention to how quickly this gets done. It does matter. So once they complete all that information, they even put in when they worked together with the reference, where they worked together. All of this will be verified and validated by each reference. And so when they work together and how long is really critical to get right. Once they've completed all of that, they will sign a consent form giving the references the opportunity to share candid thoughts about the person that they worked alongside with. And so that's what they need to come prepared to do.
Okay, so if you're a job seeker, you have to have that information ready, and you need to respond as soon as you can. After you, as a job seeker, hit the send button and you supply that information, what should you do next? Should you reach out to your references, Ray?
Actually, you should do all of this beforehand. First, you still want to get their permission to be a reference for you. It's just a professional courtesy that you reach out to the references beforehand, making sure that they will be willing to be a reference for you. But I would even take it one step further. I would meet with the references, knowing that an online reference checking solution now is something where references do, in fact, share more candid information. Mind you, we have surveys that the references will complete that are very job and behavioral specific. It would also ask each reference to provide, areas of strength that the applicant has, as well as, areas for development. At the end of the day, the applicant really should be prepared to understand what the reference is going to say about them. Because ultimately, what we've learned, Mac, is that our clients are using the online reference checking solution that we provide. They're using it earlier in the hiring process. And so it's now becoming part of the interview versus waiting till the very end as almost a cursory throwaway where someone's made an offer predicated on a background screen and a reference check being done. Because hiring managers value the feedback the references are giving them through this solution, they're now asking for a skill survey report prior to interviewing someone, or maybe during the second interview, to really leverage the information that the references are providing. So the applicant should really be aware of what the references might say about them, especially around the areas of development. Look, no one's perfect. Everyone's got areas of development, including me. And so I should probably know going into the interview what my references might say would be mine, so that I can actually be upfront indicate how self-aware I am about myself and how I'm working on these types of things. Because questions are always asked in the interview. Tell me where you could improve yourself. Why wouldn't I want to leverage what the references might say about me?
Now, you mentioned the importance of reaching out to your references before, not only to get their permission, but to give them a heads up that this is coming. What else should a job seeker tell their references about what to expect? Typically, Ray, for example, how long does it take someone who's been tapped to be a reference to fill out a form? One of these online surveys?
I think it's a great question, because a reference might say, well, what am I to expect, right? And so to be ready for that type of question coming from one of your references, you should tell them that, look, the company I'm interviewing with is using this online reference checking solution. They may or may not know the name of it. It doesn't really matter. But you as a reference should be aware that an email will be sent to you that will ask you to complete a survey on me. And when you worked alongside me, or maybe you were my boss, or maybe you were a direct, a report of mine. In either case, this is a survey. I understand that you will be able to rate your experience with me. There are 20 or 25 questions in one of these surveys. It'll take you 5 to 7 minutes to complete. And when you're done, you just basically hit or say you're finished, and that's all you'll be required to do. I understand that you can use your device of choice, and so really the applicant should tell the reference, you can use your device of choice. I understand this is mobile enabled, so your iPad, your smartphone, your computer, whatever is your best device to use, and then it won't take you more than 5 or 7 minutes to complete.
Okay. And then finally, you mentioned there's value in having more than 3 references, and you suggested perhaps having a list of 5 at hand. Why is 5 a better number? And Ray, and what else should people think about when choosing their references? Is it just direct reports, professional colleagues? Any advice for job seekers on those points?
Not just advice, but actually the system requires, our clients require that at least 2 of the 5 be former managers or supervisors. So they certainly want to get the manager's point of view on how you were as an employee. The others can be, and traditionally are, direct reports, customers, and or colleagues. So there's a little bit more leeway or flexibility for applicants to put 3 others amongst those categories, but at least 2 need to be, former managers or even current, but managerial level people. So that is a must-have. And why 5 versus 3? Look, the more opinions you can gather, or an employer can gather on your work behaviors, on your interpersonal skills, on your problem-solving, decision-making type of attributes, the more opinions they can get, the more it matters. And ultimately, our science indicates that as well.
Well, terrific. Well, thank you, Ray. Now tell us what's coming up next for you.
Well, so, we continue to look for ways to help applicants find jobs through this solution. And by the way, I think it's really important to understand that this allows a lot of people to be considered that might not have been considered for the roles they're interviewing for. We know that, half the population, Mac, are introverts, and so introverts sometimes can really be challenged in the hiring process. And so, this invites people into the as more being considered for those roles where they might have not been considered because maybe they didn't perform that well in the interview, and yet their colleagues and managers would say these people are superstars. As far as what we're also doing for the references is we've launched a solution. It's called Source. And Source actually, once the reference completes the survey, Source allows the reference to also introduce themselves to the company that the applicant's applying for as someone who might also be interested in a role there too. So we're not just looking for applicants to better present themselves from the references point of view going through the system. We're giving references the opportunity to turn into actual applicants themselves.
Well, we'll be sure to include a link to your company and your services in the show notes. And I know people can learn more about you and your firm by visiting skillsurvey.com. Ray, thanks for being on the show today.
Thank you, Mac. Greatly appreciate it.
We're back in the Maxlist studio with Jenna and Ben. Now, tell me, you two, what are some key points you heard Ray make in my conversation with him? Jenna?
I thought he brought up a really good point about keeping track of when you met your references, because I think it's really hard to go back. And I think a lot of companies are pretty flexible on the like how long have you known your best friend, or like a character reference, like, oh, I grew up with them, or we met in high school. It's not like a specific date, but when you're applying and you're saying, Ben was my manager from March 2016 till current, that's very, very specific, and you need to be on top of that. And it's also really good to have what you say and what your resume say match. So just make sure that you've got all of that locked up and they're aware of it, and you're just reminding them so everyone's saying the same story.
Yeah, alignment I think is key here. I know that's a little jargony, alignment, but yeah, good point, Jenna. Ben?
So I think the most shocking thing he said was that the number one indicator of success for the candidate was the number of references of people who stand up and serve as a reference for that person, and the speed at which those people stand up and serve as a reference for the person, which is really shocking when you think about it, because it has nothing to do with what those people are actually saying. Now, that doesn't mean that the employer is not listening to what the people are saying, but it is saying that volume and speed are really important in this in terms of determining whether that candidate's a good fit for the company. And so I think this speaks to the need to have your references ready and queued up. So when they do get that notice saying, will you be a professional reference for Ben, they quickly do it, right? Maybe in this new world of online reference checks, you wouldn't have hired me because you couldn't talk to Juan Samoas out in Spain because I couldn't get him online fast enough for you.
I agree, Ben. I thought that was a very interesting point, because there's so much in the job hunting process that we don't control, but we do have some control over. At least we have the opportunity to say to our references, hey, I'd be grateful not only if you do this, but if you can do it as soon as possible. That increases the likelihood that I might get an offer. And the more people I can get to respond, the greater the likelihood that offer might happen. I thought that was a good insider tip and something that job seekers can act on.
Just one more thing I want to add. If you are a recent college grad or a high school student or a parent or someone else returning back to work, definitely think about your network. So you might be thinking, I don't have a lot of professional references. Like, when I was younger, it would have been a stretch to find 5 people to vouch for me. But there is like your high school teachers, your college professors, your places that you interned, people that you babysat for, anyone where you've done any sort of work for is a good way to get them to be references and just kind of coach them through that. And it shows that you're being professional. And the flip side, I think, is if you're a parent returning back to work and you've been out of the job hunt for a while, or your manager, you have no idea where your manager is from a decade ago, just reaching out, your PTA, where you're volunteering, faith communities, book clubs, anything where you've done any sort of organizational thing, and just asking for those character references, because really employers just want people that can do the job and that are friendly and helpful and smiley and all those great things. So if you're fretting, don't worry. There's people out there that will vouch for you.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right, Jenna. Well, thank you, and you as well, Ben, and thank you all for listening to today's episode of Find Your Dream Job. If you like what you hear, please sign up for our free weekly newsletter. In each issue, we give you the key points of that week's show. We also include links to all the resources mentioned, and you get a transcript of the full episode. If you subscribe to the newsletter now, we'll send you our job seeker checklist. In one easy-to-use file, we show you all the steps you need to take to find a great job. Get your free newsletter and checklist today. Go to maxlist.org/podcast. Join us next Wednesday when our special guest will be Andrea Gearson. She'll explain why your resume might not be getting you any interviews. Until next time, thanks for letting us help you find your dream job.